This young lady, look, she's done some spectacular things in her life. I only know a couple things, but I know she's done more than that. She got her own day in Kansas City. Plus, she has co-written a spectacular book called 15 Cents on the Dollar. Please welcome to Brian's World, Mrs. Ebony Reed. How you feeling today?
Doing well. Brian, how you doing?
I'm good. Of
I'm sitting
course,
at my home in Kansas City, so I'm glad to be home. I'm on
uh,
the road. Yeah.
thank God the weather's cooperating.
Yes. Yes.
Cause man, look, last month, look, February and January, the weather wanted to act up. So
It
I don't
did.
know how long were you here? Were you here at any time in January or February?
I was on the road quite a bit in January and February, but I was here for some stretches where it was very cold. We had a lot of snow. I was here that weekend. Remember the airport shut down because of the ice
Yeah.
storm? I
Hmm.
had I had gone out that weekend because I thought, oh, let me just run out before the ice storm. I had to turn around and come home. I
Yeah.
couldn't. It was yes.
Yeah, it got bad for a minute in KC, but it's good that you're in good proximity. Hopefully you might got some barbecue sauce on your fingers right now that because that you just licked off or whatever. But no, all jokes aside, 15 cents on the dollar. It is such a great book that you wrote last year, and like you said, you've been all around the country talking about it, doing a lot of interviews. But what was the one thing that inspired you to write this particular book?
Well, my co-author Louise Story, who I worked with at the Wall Street Journal, on this project, we go back several years. So in the summer of 2020, if you think back to then, remember we were kind of like all in our homes, shuttered up. That first pandemic summer, we couldn't go anywhere; everything was shut down. And she lives on the East Coast, and I'm here in Kansas City. And I worked for her at the Journal. She recruited me to join her there. We were just having conversations like in the evenings and the weekends on Zoom, just like this. And we were talking about books that we were reading, inequities we had seen in society and in workplaces and communities throughout our lifetime. And we realized quickly that there is no book that is the complete history of the Black-white wealth gap in our country. A lot of great books, very detailed, excellent books and reporting on redlining and the history of slavery and a lot of topics, but we hadn't seen a book that really broke down how the Black-white wealth gap started in our country and brought it to present day with living contemporary people. So, this is a book that's a deep dive on seven Black families. It also runs along the story of a fintech named Greenwood that has a stated mission to try to close the Black-white wealth gap. And so we offer that, experience for readers as well.
Did you base your studies with these families in one particular city or one particular region in the United States?
So the book is based out of Atlanta. And the reason, the rationale behind that is, Atlanta is well known as being, the Black Mecca, a place where a lot of Black Americans have gone and sort of seen as a potential economic promised land at different times for different reasons. And the founders of Greenwood were also in that part of the country, are also in, Atlanta. So that includes Andrew Young, the former Atlanta mayor. It includes Michael Render, also known as Killer Mike, who is a artist that I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with. Also Ryan Glover, who's an entrepreneur and started Bounce TV with the King family and others. So we focused on them because they were founders of this fintech, but then also looked at people that either were customers or fit the profile of customers. So that's where you meet a young woman from North Carolina that's trying to raise up her family economically, and she's trying to make it to Atlanta so she can live, the dream in the big city. She's from a small town. And you also meet, a man who is an entrepreneur and is running an unlicensed barbecue business when we first met him by a gas station. And you see what happens to him in his life, where he is a victim of a rent to own contract for a house. And you see the predatory things that he experiences. And then you also meet the youngest head of the Georgia NAACP who's trying to, fight for justice, but he's not paid in his work. And so he has to live with, family members and he's trying to figure out how to make it. And he's impacted by the student loan crisis. And so you meet all of these people. And so while the title of the book, it's 15 cents on the dollar, that comes from federal data. And what it means is that a typical Black family has 15 cents in wealth for every $1 in wealth a white family has. And so Louise and I traced the family trees of these families going back 5 to 6 generations. So as you learn, what happened in our country historically that contributed to the Black-white wealth gap being created, you meet who these people have descended from. And I also, Brian, like to let people know, the early reporting plan for this book, it came right out of this kitchen. Like this kitchen I'm sitting in right now. Louise was here in April of 2021, and we were mapping out an early reporting plan, right here in Kansas City for this book. It was just 8 weeks after my partner, Terez Paylor, had passed away. And we were just like, can we still do this book? And, he read an early proposal for it. And it was like, this is going to be an important book. You should do it. You should do it with Louise. And so I'm really proud that like we were able to do it. It took us 3 years, 400 interviews. And Kansas City was also our first stop for the public symposiums that we've been having about racial wealth gaps and educating people about the data and the topic. We held our first one a little bit more than a year ago on February 26, 2024, right here in Kansas City, and learned a lot from that gathering, and then went on to do it, in dozens of other communities across the country.
Man, I got so many questions that spawned off of that. I want to get to the predatory loan thing because that in our community is devilish. But before I get to that, so like is 15 cents on a dollar specific to Black Americans, or is that like Hispanics? Is that Asians? Is that just Black people?
That's a great question. It is specific to Black people, and I'll talk a little bit about the other racial wealth gaps, but I invite your listeners to go to our website. It's 15 cents, so 15cents.info. And at 15cents.info, people can see some charts and graphics, and they can learn more about this topic. We also have a listing of independent and Black bookstores where people can also purchase the book if they like to patronize one of those types of retailers. The Latino white gap is 22 cents on the dollar. And so economists have said that that number, from the Federal Reserve doesn't include undocumented workers. And for that reason, people often question whether or not the true Latino white wealth gap is closer to the 15 cents that we see in the Black community. I should also say that 15 cents on the dollar is also the median and it is the mean. So what I mean by that is like a question that we hear from people is, well, if you were to take all of the white billionaires out of the data, would this gap go away? Because there are more white billionaires than there are Black billionaires. And the answer to that is no. And the reason the answer is no is that 15 cents, or another way to look at it is, a Black average American household has 15 cents, excuse me, 15% in the wealth of a white family. That is true in the mean, which is the average, but it is also true in the median, which is when you line up all the numbers in the distribution and you look at the number in the middle. And when you look at the median, if you kick out, billionaires on the end, that's not going to change the median. And so we explain that to people in our symposiums. We also explain to people what wealth is. Brian, there's a lot of people that don't know what wealth is. And you can tell when they start talking to you and you're telling them about wealth, and then they say, well, there are people at my job that, earn the same as me, or maybe we're in union jobs and the salaries are posted, or, I know that the people who hold these jobs all make in a certain range. And what they're speaking about is income. Wealth is everything that you own minus what you owe. And income can be an input into wealth, but income is not the same thing as wealth. Income can help us, develop wealth. Like we could save our money and become wealthier, for example. But income and wealth are two different things. And wealth, to an extent, can seem invisible, right? Because we don't know. If you see someone and they're living in a large home, that house could have a lot of debt on it. They could be driving, a fancy car, have nice jewelry. That stuff could be, really, carrying a lot of debt for them. And so I think because of that, a lot of times people, don't really understand the true definition of wealth and sometimes get confused around wealth and income. And we hear that from people and have heard that from people as we've been out in the last year talking with communities across the country.
And with your research in this book, 15 cents on the dollar, um, you just referred to the rent to own scams,
Yeah, let's go
if
back
I
there.
may
I'm
say.
sorry. I'm sorry. I took us down a
You could
whole different.
no, no. This is information. This is good stuff. But you mentioned that, and it heightened my senses because growing up in the hood in Kansas City and Village Green, there was always a check cash in place,
Hmm.
on every major street corner, probably in every hood in the United States.
Hmm.
And these things are awful. The interest rates are sky high, but that's nothing that we pay attention to or even nothing that we know about. It's like if there's I'm just gonna make up a number. If there's a 30% interest rate on this $1,000 that I'm about to give you, they don't know that I have to pay. I can't come up with the number. It's not $3,000, but it's something. It's another bill that you have to pay in order to get more money. And people accumulate these things, and the debt gets deeper, the credit scores get worse. You can't go to school now, you can't sign off on loans for your kids to go to school. It's a big snowball effect of debt and poverty. Like how do we get out of this mud, this
It
quicksand?
it sounds like you're quoting our book, because that is
Oh,
the story
really?
of the people of some of them in the book. I
I
mean,
haven't read the book yet. I'm an audiobook person. I haven't read
well,
it
it's
yet,
listen,
but
it's on audio,
that's
it's on
crazy.
Kindle. That's no excuse, Brian.
Okay, no, I'm gonna get to it.
It's a long book. It's a 400 plus page book, so it is a time commitment. But the people who have finished it tell us that it was well worth the time. I mean, so how do we get out of it? Well, let me say before I, go down that path and offer some thoughts. The rent to own contracts. The reason the rent to own contracts for homes are challenging for people who participate in them is because they do not offer the same protections as mortgages. So if you have a mortgage through a bank on a home and you're making your payments and a person, gets behind, then there are certain protections that like protect the equity that you have in there and you can get caught up and you can work with the bank. With the rent to own contracts, what makes them a mechanism that a lot of people consider to be predatory is that, if a person falls behind, that person can lose everything that they've put into the home. And so that's when we get into like, these contracts and really reading them and understanding, the fine print of what we're signing up for. I am not, and neither is my co-author, financial advisors. And we also, as journalists, do not offer policy recommendations, but, we do encourage people at a macro level, we offer some thoughts about, partnering with people who are different throughout your lifetime on a significant project. We offer people the consideration to think about more wealth transparency in our country. But I also hear too from Black Americans who say to me, "That's nice, Ebony, but I need to know what to do right now."